Hello, welcome to SaaS Unbound, brought to you by SaaS Group. I'm your host, Anna Nadeina, and this is the show where we chat with inspiring founders and experts to get an inside scoop on how they made their business a success. And today with us is Melissa Kwan, third-time Bootstrap founder, now growing eWebinar, an automated webinar platform that combines pre-recorded videos with real-time interactions. So we're here today to talk about Melissa's journey. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you here. I know how busy you are, and you've been doing podcasts a lot, and I really want to know how it aligns with your personal brand strategy and with the way you sell the vision of the business that you're in. But first, could you talk a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I've been in startups for 13 years now. eWebinar is my third Bootstrap startup. So my previous two startups were both in the real estate tech space. Always been in sales and business development. Been nomading now for 4 years, even though we right now have a home base in Amsterdam. The last home I had was in New York. And eWebinar is a product that I wish existed in my previous company. Also an idea that was born out of bootstrapping. So I was the person that was doing all of the demos, onboarding, training, all those repetitive webinars, and wished that I had a product that would do that for me while I could just go and live my life. So that's exactly the problem I'm solving for other founders and teams like myself, is we turn any video into an interactive webinar that you can set on a recurring schedule. So you can do hundreds of them without actually being in front of the camera live.
Okay, that's very interesting. I think it's a great problem to solve. So at what point did you decide that you were going to build a product like that? I mean, you're moving from prop tech. This is still a huge step out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was that huge. I think technology is technology. It doesn't really matter what industry you're in. You're just solving a problem. And of course, like this problem of doing the same thing over and over again was something I lived with for 5 years. So it was just something I just knew intimately well. And, as in the past, as I would complain to my other vendor buddies about it, everybody has this problem and they try to solve it, in a different way, right? Some companies are much larger than others. So they might have like 100% or 100-person customer success team, but most companies don't have that. So it was just something that was in the back of my mind for a long time. And then I started this company 2 months after my previous company was acquired, mainly because I saw how fast customer expectations, like consumer expectations were rising. And I just didn't want to wait another few years before, we have even higher expectations of how something is going to work before I put something out there. So I didn't really start a company because I love starting companies. That's what people think. But, I sold my company for like pretty good money, but not retirement level. So I don't want to work forever. And I felt like, the urgency to start something else, because this was something that I couldn't let go of my mind. But also I wanted to get into something else right away, because I didn't want to spend like the next 10 years working. Success is not repeatable, right? Just because you had one in the past does not mean that you're going to have one in the future. Right. I think that's a misconception. There are certain things that do get easier because, for example, you have, maybe an existing list of customers that you can call on, or you've learned how to hire better, or how to vet people better, or how to validate an idea better. But there's still a process that you need to go through. Right? You can only build as quickly as time allows, or as many people that you have, or as much resources that you have. So there are definitely learnings that I brought into this company that was able to shorten, I guess, time to market and time to value. But, every day is a challenge. And I think like, even though you have experience building product in companies, people change, right? Like consumers change, how they want to learn about things, how you can market to them, how you can sell to them has significantly changed, right? From what things were like even a couple of years ago. Like if you think about where we consume content and marketing mediums, consumer behavior. So as things are still changing, even though you know how to build product, you still have to learn, a lot of new things. But I joke about this a lot, but there is truth to it. I think this will be my last tech company.
Okay, so no fourth time.
No, I think after this, my goal in life will be to convince people away from starting tech companies.
That's a good one. But let's talk a little bit about the exit, right? So why did you decide to exit, and was it in your plans from the very beginning? And like, what is the mindset for eWebinar?
Yeah, I mean, my previous company was a much more difficult product. It was very niche. It was really only in the US. We had some Canadian clients, but not a lot. Like, it was just a very, very niche product for a niche set of customers. So we couldn't really expand beyond where we were without a lot more effort. I didn't like, starting a tech company in the past, I didn't really have, entrepreneur friends, or I didn't come from an entrepreneur family. So starting a company to exit was really a brand new concept to me. It was something that I had to learn. Like, I thought I was just starting a business, and this business was going to create a lifestyle for me. But then as you get into the industry, you realize, oh, people actually build tech companies to sell. And I wasn't really looking for an exit, but I was pretty tired of where I was. And a friend of mine had said, hey, if you're actually looking to sell, we're looking to make our first acquisition. So that was actually how the conversation came to be. I didn't put on a dog and pony show and hire a banker and go pitch a bunch of companies. Like, I just wanted to change. I wanted to do something else. And someone that I could envision myself working for, because no matter who you sell to, you have to work for them for 1 to 3 years, was looking to absorb us into their company. So it was just an opportune time. And funny enough, I was actually complaining to him about how I didn't want to do this anymore. And then he was like, oh, like maybe this could be a potential partnership, but you have to stay. So that was why I sold. I didn't sell because it was like a thriving business. I was okay. It was definitely profitable, but I was just tired of running it, and I was ready to do something else. And also I was seeing that there was a lot of things happening in the world that I wasn't a part of. So the opportunity cost of doing something else that was more interesting was bigger than what I was actually creating out of this company. And at that point, I'd been in real estate for like more than 10 years. And I was just ready for a new challenge. And I think with the eWebinar, of course, like if one day this thing sells, it would be amazing. Like everybody wants an exit at some point. But if you build a company because you want to exit, it's going to be a very tough road, because very few percentage of companies actually get an exit, right? So you have actually more companies in the middle, like between zero to unicorn. There are a lot of like gray area companies that actually give everybody involved a really good life. That's why I started it. I wanted to start eWebinar to give myself and my partner freedom to do what we want. We have some friends and family investors, even though we're bootstrapped, right? So we want to give our friends and family also, passive income and a lifestyle that they wouldn't otherwise have if this were to be successful, fully understanding that this might go to nothing, right? That was the first conversation that we had. But like, if eWebinar could be an ATM machine that could just, give everybody involved a good income, and we could have fun doing it, that's why we're doing this. And if along the way, this becomes a really valuable company for someone else, unless it's a life-changing generational wealth exit, it's not worth selling. Because if this paid everybody a really good salary every single month and it allowed us to call all of our own shots for the next 10 years, for the next 15 years, that's more valuable to me than somebody buying this right now for 10 times revenue or 20 times revenue, because our revenue is just not that high, right, to justify that, right? But if we're at 10 million ARR and someone were to give me 10 times revenue and we own 90% of the company, I mean, that's a very different conversation. So that's the mindset right now, is like, first we want to take care of ourselves. We want to make sure that the business is profitable. And then if one day this becomes a valuable exit for all of us, and we never have to work again, then that would be pretty cool.
That's a great one. I think it's really a very holistic approach to it. Like let's everybody thrive. Let's have a lifestyle that we want, but not maybe shoot for the stars. Instead of just going after hyper growth and just killing ourselves trying to get to this huge exit of a lifetime. I really like it.
Yeah, I mean, I think not enough entrepreneurs think about their lifestyle. And I write a lot about this. I talk a lot about this is like when you build a company, the product that you put out there is important, but not as important as the lifestyle you want to have while you're building this. Right. So if I take VC money, I am forced to hypergrow this company. And my lifestyle could be very different. I'm nomadic, but if I take someone else's money, maybe they're going to want me to have a physical location in an office, and I'm going to have to hire people in a certain location. And we have to do all this team building stuff. And that's the show that I'm going to have to put on for my VCs. And that's going to take away the thing right now that gives me the most joy, which is living wherever I want, getting up whenever I want. I don't set an alarm clock, and having everybody be remote, and I can hire anybody that I want. Everybody's a contractor. Nobody's a full-time employee, right? So for me, the lifestyle that I have while building the company is so much more important than, what this could be if it were to be a unicorn, right? But I think when you say shoot for the stars, like that to me is a very personal thing, right? For someone else, shooting for the stars might be like an IPO, right? Or like $1 billion exit. For me, shooting for the stars is having something that allows me to have freedom for the rest of my life and never work again. So that could be, $5 million, depending on where I live, or it could be $10 million, right? It doesn't have to be 100, right? So I'm not really that greedy. So I always, encourage other entrepreneurs to really think about like, what does success mean for you? Like not defined by someone else or like a TechCrunch article, right? But what is enough for you, and then work backwards to get there and make that your goal instead of, putting ego first and saying, oh, I have to have this thing, right? And if you feel like, oh, I have to have this thing, like I have to do this moonshot thing, like, are you doing it for the right reason?
So, do you think a lot of founders are pressured by the media or by other founders to go after VC's money and to have this metric, I raised a fund, as a success metric?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that, and I've written a lot about it. I talk a lot about this, on other people's podcasts and on my own podcast, Profit Led as well. Is like I lived through that. Like when I moved to New York from Vancouver, I was surrounded by other founders that were like everybody was raising money, right? Everybody was from like Harvard or MIT or something fancy. And there's all these meetups and everyone's asking you if they can intro you and if you can intro them and what you're building and what series you're raising. And then that really makes you feel like, oh, if I don't bring in some money from some brand name VC, then I'm not doing something important. Then I don't have a license and the right to build something that's also important, that's front page worthy. And that's really toxic, right? I think if that's what you want, then you should go for it. But if that's what you think you want because, your next door neighbor in a WeWork is doing it, then you have to really recalibrate, right? And think, what are the things that are important to me? And I think, you read all these cool things in the media and you want to be a part of that. And the only people that want to be a part of that are people that aren't really getting off the ground yet. Like if you're doing something that is important, that's giving you revenue, that you have raving fans and happy customers, you don't actually need someone else to validate that you have a good business. The only people that are chasing that are people that need external validation because maybe they need more customers, maybe they need to chase growth, maybe they need more money, and they need to create this facade that they're actually doing something meaningful. But you don't really need someone else to tell you you're good if you are actually good yourself and you're resolved in what you're doing.
Was it the reason why you were bootstrapped the third time and why you went nomadic? Like, is it all part of seeking that freedom within the business and outside of it?
No, and the reason why I know the story so well is because I tried to raise money. Like in my first company, or sorry, in my second company, Spacio, which was ultimately acquired. I moved to New York to grow this company, and I was constantly out of money. Like I never had any money. We couldn't get any customers. Like we would get one or two, but then we couldn't get it off the ground, and it was a really tough time, right? So I just tried to get money either from customers or either from investors or VCs, like anywhere I could, and nobody would give me money. And as I was trying to raise money, I was also trying to iterate on the product and close more customers. And because nobody gave me money, we ended up becoming profitable. And then I realized the only people that have to give you money are your customers. And once you can float yourself, you can call all of your own shots. You can go anywhere you want. And, I at that point, I had spent already something like 6 or 7 years chasing bills, like chasing like 15th and 30th, needing to make payroll. And as we were getting closer and closer to profitability, I was freeing up some mind share to think about what I personally wanted. Like I just didn't even have any breathing room. I was constantly in survival mode. And I realized I wanted to do something for myself after so many years of doing something for someone else. And I just asked myself, like, if I were to build this company and everything was going to be hard anyway, what is the one thing that I could do for me? And I didn't really travel a lot as a kid or even as an adult up to that point. And I realized like I wanted to leave New York and travel full time. And I wanted to do this from Airbnbs. And at that point, I was paying so much money for my room in New York. I had a shared house where like 5 other people lived, and I was taking the same rent and like going to Airbnb and seeing like what else I could get for like $4,000 a month American. And so I realized like I could actually get a lot more and have life experiences. So the reason to go nomadic was because I just wanted to try something different, and I wanted to do something for me. And it didn't matter anyway, because at that point, my team was in Canada and I was in New York, and we were always remote because we couldn't afford an office. So it didn't really make a difference. I was remote before it was cool. And that was actually the decision, is like, I just wanted to do something that made me happy. And then a year after that, Spacio was acquired by another company.
Okay, that's amazing. All right. So let's talk more about eWebinar, right? Your third rodeo, and what is it like? Why you were doing it? Why did you start it? How did you start it? How do you find your first customers and the product market fit? Was it any easier? Was it any faster?
I mean, it's definitely easier because this is a product that people actually want. Like my last company, like we built that company for 5 years, but 2.5 years of those, we didn't have any customers because we just couldn't, like we couldn't find a product that people would pay for. Like we just kept iterating on something. With eWebinar, like while we built it in a silo for 2 years, like we started charging people from day one. Like this was a product that was desirable from day one. So that was, something that I learned, like being able to vet an idea and come up with an idea that someone would actually pay for before you build any code. Like that was something that I had to learn from my experience building 2 other startups. But as I mentioned before, like eWebinar solves a problem that I personally live with. So because we were bootstrapped, in the past, I was everything except for code. So I was like sales, marketing, product, accountant, like janitor, like I was literally everything. So I was the person that would do all these sales demos, onboarding and training sessions through GoToWebinar or Zoom to my customers. So anyone that sells SaaS right now knows that like onboarding and training is just as important, or if not more important than the initial sale. But the problem was every single one of these webinars were exactly the same, and then nobody would show up for them. Like I remember rolling out for a 7,000 person company, and like 30 people showed up for the launch session. And then people, like my customer, would want me to do it again and again and again, but I didn't have anyone doing them. And especially for these onboarding and training sessions, people want webinars. They don't want to watch a video. Like they want something that they can interact with and ask questions. So I was envisioning this product that would take the perfect video and turn it into a webinar that has a live chat component. So I could be, at a restaurant doing the webinar and still responding to chats from my phone. And like, there's similar products that kind of existed, but nothing exactly the way that I envisioned. And so after Spacio was acquired, I decided to solve this particular problem once and for all. So eWebinar is exactly that. Like, we take your perfect video, whether it's a sales demo or an onboarding session, we turn it into a webinar so you can do it 1,000 times without being in front of a camera. And the thing that makes us competitive and different is we've got an asynchronous chat component, kind of like an intercom chat, where you can respond to people live if you're there. But if you're not and you respond later, people get an email. And then throughout the session, you can program in things like, polls, questions, quizzes, contact forms to make the experience more of a two-way experience and not like a one-way video consumption. And because people have something to do, they're more likely to watch till the end, where you could deliver, your CTA, or, whether that be like book a call or, another session. So that's what it does. And how we got our first 100 customers is really just me like hitting the phones and emails and telling people, hey, this is my next thing. Can I get on the phone with you and show you what I do? And ironically, I was doing the same thing that this product is supposed to solve, right? So for 8 weeks straight, I was just doing like one-on-one demos with people, like on Zoom, introducing myself again to my old customers, because I knew that they were living this problem, and I knew that they were solving it some other way, like whether they were using a video on YouTube or Wistia, or putting it on their knowledge base, or doing Zoom sessions, but not enough. So I probably personally onboarded our first 100 customers before we moved to a more like one-to-many product-led growth strategy.
Okay. All right. That's great. And obviously that was the first push, right? So once you started growing, getting more customers, what works best for you? Is it content? Is it SEO? Is it the fact that you grow your personal brand? So what is it for you?
I mean, it's all of those things, right? Like, I came into this company thinking it was going to be much easier than it actually is. I've only ever sold one-on-one. Like, sales is my background. Marketing is not my background. So my previous companies, I always sold enterprise products that were like 10,000 to 100,000 a year. So the sales is just me reaching out, going to conferences, checking in, right? Like, it's much easier to sell to somebody one-on-one than sell to someone that is just somewhere in the internet, where they have to come to your website and sign up for a trial, and then maybe they convert and maybe they don't. But it was the business I wanted to build, right? One of the things that I learned from my previous company was I didn't want to build a company that required me to do one-on-one sales. Like, I don't want to get on a call at 4 a.m. in Kyoto, right? I want to just live my life and do all of my sales and all my support on the internet. I want people to be able to find me. I don't want to hop on a plane and go into a conference and set up a booth, which is what is required when you're selling enterprise products. So I wanted a product that has no customization, like what you see is what you get. And I wanted something with a low price point that people could not demand my time one-on-one. So like, I wanted to build like a MailChimp, not a Salesforce. So coming into this, I thought it would be much easier because I didn't have an experience doing digital marketing. And then I realized that when you're selling a $100 product and you try to reach out to someone, no one cares about you. Only people that know you are going to respond, because that's not how they buy, right? Like, MailChimp is not going to have a sales force that's doing outbound calls, because people are like, hey, it's $50. Like, I'm not going to return your call for $50. I'm going to return your call for $50,000 because that's how I buy. So I didn't learn that until probably like 6 months after the product launched, and I had exhausted my entire network. And then I tried to cold call, because that's what I know. I tried to cold call people of like, that were like VP of sales or VP of customer success, but I couldn't get anyone to respond. And then I realized products like this is only grown through, customer-led or product-led growth and marketing. So that's when I actually took Justin Welsh's course on LinkedIn operating system. And then I realized, like, the future of sales is community-led. through social validation. People want to do their own research, their own education. They want to learn about this on their own. They want to read review sites. They want to learn about you on LinkedIn. They don't want to be sold to. So now 80% of my time is spent on content generation. And then 20% of my time is spent on distribution. And doing podcasts is actually one distribution channel. And writing on LinkedIn once or twice a day is one of those things as well. So I think for the first time, people care just as much about the story behind the product and the brand and the people as much as what the product does. It's no longer enough to just put a good product out there, right? People want to know, like, what's the mission? What is this made of, right? Like, are you donating to anything? Like, who are the founders from? Like, and that's not just software, that's also physical products, right? So now you see all these founders and executives of companies being content creators on, Twitter and on LinkedIn. And I'm really only seeing that, I guess, in the past couple years now that I've been doing it. And that's how people, either they learn about me or they learn about my product. So this is kind of a whole new world. It's probably 100 times harder than anything I've ever done before, but it's also 1,000 times more rewarding because it's not just me picking up the phone or me sending one email and it stops there. Every piece of content that I create has evergreen value, right? The podcast that we're doing today, someone might find it like 2 years from now, right? Because they're going back to, the first few episodes kind of thing, right? So it's an interesting new world, but it's definitely much more challenging and just harder.
How much of the content generation and the branding should come from a founder, especially of an early stage startup, do you think?
100%. Like, I mean, there's nobody else that is more important than a startup founder, especially in the early stages, right? Like, and I think it kind of depends too. Is it a tiny startup like me? Or is it, a super well-funded startup with all-star founders like Superhuman, right? Those are two categories of startups, right? Like if you have one of those startups, you might be hiring an all-star team of people that already have pedigree. And every single one of your executives, especially if they already have some following and some audience, should be creating content and should be putting their voice out there. But, if you're a small startup, and everyone's trying to do 10 different jobs and you don't have an existing audience, like maybe you can hold off on that a little bit. But the founders, especially the business founder, maybe not, the tech founder, should be out there like creating content. And this is actually one of my biggest regrets is for the 2 years that we were building eWebinar, I didn't do anything. Like I didn't know, right? I was still working for my previous company. I had a contract with them, like after they bought my company. And I was just sitting there working for them and waiting for this to get built so that my job would come up next. Had I known back then what I know today, I would have started to brand myself. I would have gotten on podcasts that talks about acquisitions and mergers and startups, right? Like when it was still fresh. Like I don't go on podcasts or like I don't talk to people about the acquisition anymore because it was like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So there were definitely things that I could have done that would have, I think, accelerated my current journey. But, hopefully this tip is going to help someone else today.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I have a quote from one of your previous episodes. A sale is just the first day of the rest of your relationships with the customer. And first of all, I absolutely love it. 100% agree with it. But could you talk a little bit about the way you now strategize your acquisition and retention of the customers?
Yeah. So I think that quote was from probably something about customer success. Like, and I've been trying to be an advocate of this, but I'm obviously not loud enough. But I think a lot of people, they put a lot of emphasis on sales and investing in sales teams because it's revenue. Like there is a direct tie to revenue, right? Anna's going to close this deal that brought in 50 grand today. But what they don't think about is the years after somebody becomes a customer, that they're still paying you that 50 grand a year plus the upsell. And maybe you increase your price in year 3 and 4, right? So your customer happiness team, right? Your customer success team is actually worth 3 to 5 times your sales team. But all this money and all this emphasis and all these salaries are getting pumped into sales when customer success is actually the people that are keeping your customers there and happy and upselling them. So that's where that came from. Is I think more money and more investment should go into customer success. And as people are trying to trim the fat, I guess, of their companies right now, like everybody's laying people off, I really think they should be looking at like sales and marketing redundancies. Like having been in sales for 15 years, I can confidently say that 90% of people I meet cannot actually sell. They're just account managers. They might as well be on the CS team because they're good at farming. They're not good at hunting, right? So that I think, and that's what I think about is like, how can we invest more in keeping the customers happy after they sign on? So that means really quick responses, making sure that everyone that's responding to customers knows exactly what they're talking about. They're not just being nice, they're actually knowledgeable. So for example, we would save as many canned responses as we can so that when we are not available ourselves, that someone else that's monitoring our inbox can just find the answer so that people aren't frustrated. We make sure that the product onboards itself as much as possible. Kind of like what the Apple philosophy, I guess, right? Like there's not, if you need instructions to onboard people, then your product is already too complicated. So make sure that when somebody uploads a video, the product actually walks them through the next steps. So we don't have tooltips, right? We don't actually have like any sort of in-app language that helps people onboard. Our product kind of does it on its own. And then anywhere where we're seeing, people ask more questions, we try to look at the UI and see like, how can we make that better? Because part of that is making sure the product is as easy to onboard as possible so people don't get frustrated. But part of that is because we're a bootstrap team. We don't have extra time to respond to support and extra time to help our customers. We don't do one-on-one calls with our customers. Either you figure it out yourself or you might churn, and we have to be okay with that because we just don't have enough people. So that's how I think about it, is like, how can we make sure the product is as easy as possible so that our customers can get educated as fast as possible on their own? And if they do have a question, how do we make sure that everybody on our team that's responding has all the information possible on hand to help that person right then and there?
That's great. I actually I'm listening to you talking about the fact that you're obviously bootstrapped and how you work around it. Do you think that the fact that you're bootstrapped, and any team basically, it adds to a scrappiness, to a certain level of scrappiness where you are looking for the best outcome possible, but on a very, very tight or no budget whatsoever. And that often leads to a more creative and just in general better outcome.
Well, I definitely think desperation breeds creativity, right? Like everything we do is to make sure we reduce time and effort and cost. So I think that's the one thing that funded companies don't have, is they can afford the mistake. So, for example, you might be going for growth and revenue, so you pump a bunch of money into ads, and then you get a bunch of signups, but you're not looking at churn, and you're not looking at spend. You're not looking at profitability. You might be looking at revenue, and your monthly revenue is still going up because people are signing up, but they might be just staying for 1 or 2 months. We can't afford to pump money into ads. We have zero money spent on ads. The only ads that we invest in are retargeting ads, people that come to our site and then we retarget them elsewhere. But that's our own audience. So we definitely want to own our own brand name and our own audience, but we don't have money to create false revenue. So any mistake, any like leaky bucket, that we have to fix it right away. And I think that creates a much tighter product, and that forces you to create a business around value for customers and not value for investors. And I think that's the biggest difference between a bootstrap company and a well-funded company. I mean, eventually, a funded company has to build a sustainable business anyway. But in the beginning, where feedback counts the most, I think is when they might fall short, because they're missing out on things because they're getting positive reinforcement, maybe for some negative behavior, and they might catch that much later on.
All right. So yeah, just a couple of more questions. And first one, something that I ask every founder out there: what is your biggest win and the biggest failure so far, as a founder or as a business?
So, what is my biggest win and biggest
failure?
Just in general, like not for eWebinar, right? You mean in general?
Can be anything as a founder, as the whole journey as a founder, or take eWebinar.
Yeah, I think my biggest win, to date is making my life partner my co-founder. So David's my CTO and my co-founder, but he's also my life partner. It didn't start like that, but it ended up like that a year into the eWebinar journey. I can't imagine building a company with anyone else or any other way. So that's definitely my biggest win. And the thing is, like, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it could be super disastrous. But in my case, it definitely worked. And I would say that in my biggest failure, and something that I've learned from, is hiring friends and letting emotions get involved. Like, I think hiring friends is okay, but when you let your emotions get involved and you're not evaluating them for what they like, for their contribution as you would if they were not your friend, that's where challenges come in, right? So I would say, like, certain friendships are definitely not the same. And my biggest, I guess, financial mistake was because of this as well. So definitely something I've learned. And I think some people listening to this would be like, oh yeah, that's why I don't hire friends. Sometimes your friends are just good for the job, right? So I still hire people that I know. I still hire friends, but I have the conversation up front to say, hey, if it doesn't work out, like, let's both put that on the table and not like delay that conversation. Like, I want that to happen both ways. So right now, like, get that out of the way, but it's definitely something that I'm glad that I've learned.
Yeah, I think a lot of founders get hit by this at some point, and then there is a lot of sadness involved, because it's not just the business, it's also your relationship, and it's, it just adds up to the stress. But I have one bonus question for you. What do you think is the most overrated SaaS trend right now?
Yeah, I think it is low code / no code. Having started 3 tech companies and how much code I know requires to have a tech company, I just cannot see anyone having a real, like, profitable SaaS company that doesn't require like a lot of code or custom code. Like, I think, like, if you were to have like a small thing that does one single function, like, maybe that could work, and like no customization. Or if you were to build like an MVP of something before you move on to something much more complicated, that could work. But I just don't see like any real, like, big product being built on like a low code product. I'm waiting for someone to prove me wrong, though.
I'm actually my background is in a low code platform startup, so I could talk about it a little, but let's put it off for now. But that's very interesting. I think I've heard it a lot about the limitations and the fact that there is not too much customization involved. But yeah, let's talk about it next time. It's a very broad topic. But Melissa, it was great talking to you. I mean, obviously you have very I don't know, not I don't want to say assertive, no, but you have very strong beliefs in bootstrapping and how to do a product, how to build it well, and I admire your determination. I think eWebinar is a great product, and you certainly love it and are doing everything to bring it to the next level. So thank you for sharing your story.
Well, thanks for having me. And if anyone wants to connect with me, the best way is LinkedIn. My last name is spelled Kwan, Kwan. And if you're curious about what eWebinar can do for you and your business, just head over to ewebinar.com. We have a demo that is delivered through eWebinar. So very, very meta experience. And I always manage a chat. So looking forward to connect with anybody that's listening to this.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, Melissa, and take care.